Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to the DQP Alignment Series Webinar 4, Two Types of Knowledge, Broad Integrative Knowledge, and Specialized Knowledge. I'm Laurel Hunter, Grant Project Manager for the Degree Qualifications Profile Project, and I'll be moderating this webinar today. Many of you already know Krista Johns of the ACCJC, who will be weighing in on our conversation on the two types of knowledge. And Krista is the Vice President of Policy and Research at the Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges, and she's our Project Director here at the ACCJC Degree Qualifications Profile Project. Welcome, Krista.
Thank you.
And many of you also know Natasha Jankowski. Natasha is from the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment, and she'll be weighing in on today's discussion along with our special guest, Dr. Carol Goldsmith of West Hill College in Coalinga. Welcome, Natasha and Carol. Carol, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. The purpose of this webinar today is to provide discussion points for understanding the DQP areas of broad integrative knowledge and specialized knowledge, and to consider how organizational structures, such as having a separate general education track from the discipline or area-specific course requirements, can impact a college's approach or even success with degree-level SLOs, and to spark conversations at colleges who are working on projects involving the DQP areas of learning. I think most of our viewers are participants in DQP projects and are attending today with an eye for examining their specific project goals. But for those of you who may be new to our webinars, we hope you'll find this information to be meaningful as you explore the DQP in relation to your college learning outcomes. And we also hope you'll check out our other webinars at dqpp.org webinars. Once again, for those of you who are new to the DQP, there are 5 areas of learning: broad integrative knowledge, specialized knowledge, applied learning, civic learning, and intellectual skills. And today we'll be talking about broad integrative knowledge and specialized knowledge. So I think it might be helpful to differentiate between the two. Broad integrative knowledge is gained from exposure to general concepts from multiple fields of study, and specialized knowledge comes from the studies within a single discipline or area. And this area of the DQP allows students to both gain mastery of key principles and practices in that field of study, and it helps students to develop an understanding and competency in the learning tasks associated with mastery. And in the DQP, both the breadth-related learning and the learning around mastery are part of every associate degree. The Degree Qualifications Profile Project is a project of the Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges and is supported by a grant from Lumina Foundation. And we have 16 colleges participating in our project, from colleges in California, Hawaii, and the Marshall Islands. And the projects are separated into 2 cohorts, one with individual college projects and the other with cross-institutional collaborations on identified transfer degrees. And if you have questions about our projects or the DQP, you can contact us at the above emails or by visiting our website at dqpp.org. So let's begin our discussion with an introduction of our special guest today, Dr. Carol Goldsmith. For those of you who don't know Dr. Goldsmith, Carol is the president of West Hills College, Coalinga. She's a recognized expert in the areas of workforce development, contextualized learning, and career technical education. Dr. Goldsmith was appointed by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and later reappointed by Governor Jerry Brown to serve on the board of directors of the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley. In 2012, she was on loan from the West Hills College District to lead the educational reform efforts of the Central California Community Colleges Consortium with a $19.9 million grant. And despite her busy schedule, she still visits the classroom as an adjunct professor at the university level. Welcome again, Dr. Goldsmith. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate your work in doing this and putting together this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Carol, we know that our students and prospective students and community members, including employers, think about a degree as a cohesive package of learning, and they presume that the degree program has been thought through as a united whole, and that the learning paths will end up with all the needed learning being accomplished. Can we as higher education institutions really say that our associate degrees, including both the general education component and the discipline or area-specific component, are cohesive packages of learning that have been planned as a united whole?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think I want to start by looking at your opening statement, which is really quite accurate when you talk about that they presume that the degree program has been through a united whole. And that presumption that a degree is a cohesive package, I think, is really at the heart of what we're trying to do at West Hills with our DQP process. And for us, the DQP process has illustrated what we already intuitively knew. We knew that many of our programs and degrees weren't as intentionally or perhaps as well designed as we would have liked them. So when you ask the question, can we as higher education institutions really say that our associate degrees, all of our degrees, whether they be CTE or academic for transfer, are planned as a united whole? I think I'd have to say no. We can't make that assumption. And it's really that piece that is a bold statement in and of itself, and it's the very basis of a very courageous conversation that needs to take place not only on my campus, but I would argue throughout our country. This is a presumption that really needs to be examined. Before we embarked on the Lumina DQP project, I had an opportunity to talk in depth with my curriculum chair, Sarah Shepard, who once asked me, well, what does it mean if a West Hills College student has a degree? What does that degree mean? And I've heard employers ask this before, what does your degree mean? How does it link to what it is they know? But I really never had a conversation with faculty about that, and it really sparked my interest. So when DQP came around and we looked at it, we thought this is something for us that will really be, that will enable us to be used as a lens or a framework, because I truly believe it's a critical time for all of us in higher education to really examine what it means to have a degree. What are the skills and competencies that are taught? Because, and I know this may be a bit of heresy, especially talking to the good folks at the accreditation, but it's really not about the degree. The simple truth is we must look at what is the role of education in our country. And you look at our time now where we've been tasked by our national government and by our state government to have more degrees. This is during a time when our nation's experiencing record student loans and high unemployment. The notion of going out for an expensive education, whether it be at the 2-year, the 4-year, or the private, the idea that that degree is the best path for most people, well, that degree attainment in and of itself really hasn't been delivering on the American dream. And for years, we've been focused on the degree attainment, making sure we produce more degree holders, whether it be AA or bachelor's, and we haven't focused on the skills and competencies associated with that degree. And in my humble opinion, this is what's resulted in many, many well-educated yet unemployed individuals. So my concern, and I think it's shared by many of my colleagues at the campus at West Hills, that the national debate and even the state debate is too centered on increasing the numbers of the degrees and not looking at the quality of the degrees. And that's what's really unique, I think, about this particular project. And I really want to thank Lumina and our accreditation body for embracing this and allowing us to look at this. DQP has allowed us to look at what is a degree. And I think it will help us and help our students and basically, hopefully, the American culture is that we need to recognize it's the quality of the student achievement in college that's really key to future opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, certainly in the traditional concept of degrees as groupings of courses, we can see flaws in the concept of a cohesive program of study. However, the DQP and other national efforts are attempting to ensure colleges describe and identify their degrees in terms of learning outcomes and competencies. And for some years now, the general education component of a degree has been identified separately, and at most colleges has a separate process for its development than do the rest of the degree programs, which come out of a discipline or area of study. Do you think this organizational structure of GE curriculum complicates the process of thinking around the whole degree in the ways our students and the public expect?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the current structure of DE is fragmented, and I do believe it complicates the process of thinking in terms of degrees in a holistic manner. You know, GE focuses on a broader sense of knowledge, and we need to look at have discussions about what is it students know and what can they do with their knowledge, not just knowledge for knowledge's sake in silos based around content areas, whether it be history, English, or math. Right now, that the current structure, many would argue, and I would be one of those, that it's a little bit disjointed, and it's knowledge, and it's not really connected to content, whether it be in the broad integrated spectrum or in the specialized learning. So by using the DQP model, this really allows us, and looking at those 5 areas, to really map out where does these 5 very specific types of learning take place, and it opens up a dialogue that really simply didn't exist before. And you know, the GE discipline organizational boundaries, I think we need to remember, those are college constructs, and they shouldn't be used to define expectations, whether from the public or from funders or for employers or even for educators. You know, lastly, the discipline faculty, I think, are starting to, and at my college, have been very active in ensuring that the general education courses serve the needs of our degree students. But again, I would think that the organizational structure as it exists now in most American colleges is archaic and probably wasn't designed, definitely wasn't designed with the 21st century learner in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to a couple of general questions here. Your college has been doing some work around pathways. Can you talk a little bit about that, and specifically, how are you looking at the GE component in the context of clear pathways for students?
Yes. Our college has been looking at pathways for a number of years through a few different types of initiatives, but they've always been siloed in looking at our career technical pathways. At West Hills right now, we're looking with the DQP project specifically at 2 of our career technical pathways, that's agriculture and administration of justice. We chose those 2 because of the high demand in our area. And what's been nice about this project is it's embraced and engaged the academic faculty in new and meaningful ways. And because we know that our students, regardless of their educational pursuits, because it really makes no difference if they're a technical or scientific or an academic-based student, they all need big picture understanding of the forces that shape our world. They need an understanding that's best developed when the college curriculum includes a coherent study of the arts and sciences and all of the breadth courses in GE pattern. I don't think, and I think my faculty would agree, no one would say that general education needs to go away. In fact, quite the opposite. I think this process will make it much more robust. And I think it will also hopefully lead to a better, well-developed intellectual and practical skills that our students can use in any endeavor, whether it be civic or economic or just personal. I know sometimes reform movements like this can be seen as being too workforce-based or too academic-based. I think the degree profile provides us a roadmap of how students can really develop and demonstrate their knowledge and skills across all major fields of study. So for us, and for our faculty, it provides a framework for us to be able to better intentionally and thoughtfully design the curriculum, the assessments, and the program, and hopefully ultimately the degree.
Great, great. Well, like you mentioned, West Hills is one of the colleges working in our program to align to the DQP. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other benefits your college hopes to gain from your work with the DQP?
Oh, absolutely. West Hills College will benefit in a number of ways. First, I believe our work with DQP will be a real game changer in terms of our culture and our cherished beliefs. And what do I mean by that? Well, our faculty and administrators have really taken up the challenge about having this courageous conversation that I talked about. And the courageous conversation of our time, and I believe for our profession, it centers on discriminatory distinctions between the associate's degrees, whether between career technical programs on one hand or college transfer programs on the other. They've been long outmoded and really ought to be abolished. So we're looking at how do we change the educational culture on our campus. That's a very philosophical endeavor that we're embarking on. Second, I believe the degree qualification profile takes our student learning outcomes efforts to a new level. And we can do this by showing how essential competencies or outcomes are developed across progressively higher degree levels, starting obviously from our associate degrees to bachelor's and to master's degrees. You know, DQP for us creates a shared framework for the standards that we're all seeking, and they're all high standards. And yes, they don't have to be standardized. That's the unique part of it. We don't have to be standardized, but it does stress the cumulative and integrative quality of higher learning. It's my hope that by differentiating between the competencies expected at the associate and bachelor's degree level, it will also set up a framework for clarifying the pathway from high school into college. And that fits really nicely into our outreach efforts because we know many of our students are coming to us not prepared. By being able to have this roadmap, it will help us make that a little bit more clear, not only for our high school students entering, but also our brothers and sisters in the K-12 arena. Third, the idea of civic learning as an essential condition for the credit-bearing college curriculum, to me, I believe is transformational. And for my region in the Central Valley where we have high unemployment and high or low educational attainment, the idea of civic learning, I think, is critical for our valley and I would argue our nation. So I'm very pleased to see that it's an essential element for this particular project. And then finally, I would say our DQP initiative represents a tangible commitment for us as educational practitioners to set and achieve greater expectations for all of our learners, regardless of what discipline they come from. And dare I say, I think it sets a commitment for us as well as faculty and administrators that we're committed to student success. And this is one tangible way that we're demonstrating that. You know, my college took up a charge to be relentless as it comes to inspiring student success. So we knew we had to do things in new and transformational ways. And I truly believe, and as well as many of my faculty believe, that DQP will allow us to have that framework where we can all have that dialogue. So while this is a huge undertaking, my faculty and my administrators and my board of trustees, we see the potential that this has to be truly a transformation in our profession and for our students.
Great, great. Well, speaking of faculty, that leads into my next question really nicely. What are some of the ways which you've empowered the discipline faculty to talk with the GE faculty about the needs of students in their degree programs?
Yes. Okay. And I think this is, you know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, this one's worth 1,000,000 words. You'll see it on one side. There's a picture of me and my chancellor, Dr. Frank Gornick, and our state chancellor. And then on the other side, and typically when we talk about, you know, educational transformation, or we always look at leaders, and so oftentimes we look at people who have positions. Well, in this particular case, I would say the real leaders are our faculty. So on the right-hand side, you'll see my two faculty leaders in this project who are leading this way are Katie Kanjeev and Sarah Shepard. And both of them have been instrumental in not only taking this and taking it to the next level, but also really looking at how can we get other people involved. And one of the ways I can do that from my leadership perspective is that we allow faculty to make sure that they have the tools that they need to do this job. So the first part was I made sure that they had what they needed. This team has gotten release time. They have a room designated specifically for them. They have supplies. They have lunch. I make sure they have food. So they have the physical things that they need. But we've also created an emotional environment where it's safe to explore and discover and to fail and try again and hopefully ultimately succeed. And as their president, I've made sure that their voice is heard in my board presentations, during faculty development time, during my biweekly communications and my monthly reports to the board. In fact, I've had them come and share with our Board of Trustees about the work that they're doing. In fact, it was during one of these early presentations at a faculty development day where other faculty were excited about the work that they're doing and asked from the academic areas, hey, can we be a part of this? So that's kind of the 30,000-foot view of how you do it. Let me operationalize it just a little bit and make it really simple. We made it cool. We've made DQP cool. And the fact that it's not just another initiative, it's not just another fad, it really is part of this important philosophical shift that we're doing and how we do our work. And our work is how do we inspire learners to succeed? So we've embraced that with particular enthusiasm in an effort to bring the associate's degrees of all kinds into the shared framework. And it helps anticipate and will lay the foundation for the work of the bachelor's degree and the master's degree if we have this common framework for us to work with. So for us, it really has been a cultural evolution. So I'm just thrilled to be able to have so many faculty see the value of this project.
Well, great. Well, thank you. Well, do you have any final thoughts, Carol? Anything else you'd like to add?
You know, just briefly, you know, one of the things I kind of started off, and I talked briefly about, you know, it's really not about the number of degrees. You know, I'm sure that I share the concern that many of you may have that's listening to this thing, that all too often we have this headlong rush to embrace an artificial reform that only focuses on the number of degrees. Well, I believe that's particularly dangerous. I think it's important for our all of our educators who may be on this call or may be hearing it in a recording, that we focus our educational public relation campaigns as well as our policy work to look on student learning. And DQP really allows us to do that. It's a reform effort, I think, that helps us focus on the essential learning outcomes that can be supported by educators and employers alike. And it's just the right thing to do for students. It's the right time to do this, and I would encourage other people out there who are thinking about looking at this as a potential reform to take a good look at it, because we've been very happy with what we're seeing so far.
Well, thank you so much, Carol, for weighing in on the conversation. You bring up some very interesting and universal points, and we really appreciate your weighing in on those. I'm going to bring Krista Johns into the conversation. Welcome, Krista.
Hi.
Krista, talk with us again about the areas in the degree qualifications profile, and what is the benefit of looking at these areas separately if they all end up with the SLOs that go into every degree?
Well, first, let me just say hi again to you, Laurel, and to Carol and Natasha. And as usual, I'm sharing the mic with you on these webinars, so your name might be the one that is popping up as who's talking. That'll be between the both of us. I just wanted to reflect back how exciting it was to pick up on Carol Goldsmith's energy and passion around this subject, and to say that when leaders at the colleges, when the college presidents are knowledgeable and can support the faculty in their efforts, this is going to go places. So I can't wait to see how they go further in their project. But let me get back to the question that you asked me, and that had to do with the DQP. I'd like to go back just a minute and talk about the DQP from the start. You know, these days, everyone from the U.S. president to virtually every parent of a college student in your community expects that the college's degrees are going to have a clear, defined value that isn't just because we higher education folks say it's valuable. And degree programs need to be cohesive. That is, the program should stick together as a whole. They need to be coherent. That means they should make sense as a program of study. Degrees, by their nature, represent a planned program of learning that prepares students for the purposes defined for the degree, and ultimately that means for their futures as contributing members of society in various capacities. The learning and competencies to be achieved by each student in the degree program need to be understandably defined and need to be made known to all who are interested. And that's a shift. That's something different from what we've experienced in years past. Moreover, students, educational funders, and others in the public expect that our curriculums will have been designed around the learning needs of the student and for the purpose of delivering on those identified programmatic outcomes. So the degree qualifications profile, the DQP, provides that framework for taking SLO work to the next level so that we can evaluate our efforts and continuously improve instruction and program delivery. If we use a framework like this, we can get past the often lengthy discussions about the form or format we should use for looking at SLOs. Most of you have not been around as long as I have, but if you have been around even a short time, I'm sure you can remember some of those tortured processes around what forms will we use, what data system, who's going to be in charge, and then, oh great, that wonderful do-over when the new leader comes in with their own ideas. Starting with a framework, however perfect or imperfect you think it is, just lets us get directly beyond that and into the meaty discussions around the kind of preparation our students get or should get within the degree program. And really, for me, this is where the energy is all about in SLO work. Working off of the DQP framework also lets us establish shared understandings about what the competencies are students should have on earning a degree, and that understanding can then be across the curriculum, and it can have learning milestones that are recognizable and relevant for like degrees across institutions of higher education. This lets us bring the SLO conversation to scale a bit and lets us really be players in that realm of who's deciding what is the value of a degree. So the 5 areas of learning in the DQP represent categories of competency and skills that are a part of a college degree. And then within those, the outcomes in each area serve as a platform identifying how the learning will be manifested and demonstrated in student performance. The outcomes are laid out by degree type, from associate degree to bachelor's degree to master's degree, similar to what Carol was talking about. Oh, and by the way, if any listeners don't actually have a copy of the DQP, they can contact us, and we'll be sure to get them an electronic copy or hard copy, whatever they want. But back to the conversation, as you know, some outcomes need to be required of students who graduate at any level of a degree, and including the AA degree. In most cases, the experience and application of learning that's possible in 4 years of study will be expected to deepen and enhance the competency that can be attained in the 2-year program. But the essential character of the learning may be very much the same. So that's the way in which the cohesiveness and coherence of a program can also be seen through the levels of degree, from AA degree to bachelor's and beyond. The identified kinds of learning and the degree level outcomes provide a guide by which course level outcomes, curriculum, and methods for instruction can be refined. And students can also use the degree level outcomes to assess their own progression through the program of study, especially for understanding the way the instruction across the courses in the program build on and enhance the overarching competencies in their package of learning.
So what I think I hear you saying then, there's an element of meta-learning in this where students explicitly learn the skills to become competent in that kind of learning, as well as learning the degree content. And if so, isn't this going further than what's currently required in most degrees?
Well, yes, I would say so. The degree profile provides a framework for faculty and students to understand the capabilities for learning that are being developed. And they also provide the chance to look at the specific outcomes that need to be achieved in the degree area of study. So let's look at the learning skills in the 5 categories, and I think that'll help make it more clear. We can start with applied learning, and which we did with our first webinar. And we talk about how you're learning how to learn and to have the competencies to continuously learn through life. That is in addition to learning how to take experiences from the real world to the classroom in the degree program and applying theories for better ways of looking at problems and how to apply the real world or the theoretical work back to real life experience. In civic learning, we're talking about, on a higher level, having the student be able to recognize themselves as a member of civic society and then the responsibilities they have to contribute. We talked about in the webinar on civic learning how the developmental stage of perceiving oneself as no longer in the center of the universe, but as a person, as a part of a whole society, is a big transition during a college experience. Looking at the intellectual skills, we're talking about how students can attain the foundational skills to effectively learn in all the other areas and how to operate in the world. And this is something that they're doing in a general way, not just specific to a particular degree. Broad integrative knowledge is looking at key concepts across several fields so students learn how existing knowledge is advanced and interpreted. And then specialized knowledge is about the specific area that they're studying in, the concentration of courses in the discipline or area, and what the skills are in order to be able to achieve mastery. And then besides applying them in the degree, how to apply them more generally as a student goes through life. So looking at the kind of learning within the 5 categories helps departments and faculty understand the different aspects of similar kinds of outcomes so they aren't missed. Just a quick example, there could be an outcome, in fact there is one, involving diverse perspectives that you see in both the intellectual skills area and in the civic learning. So it's helpful to remember that the intellectual skills are foundational capabilities needed to learn effectively in all areas of learning, and that is the nature in which we approach diverse perspectives there. And in civic learning, it's about the key developmental stage of understanding oneself as a member of society. And so that is the approach and the purpose around which we have an outcome pertaining to dealing with diverse perspectives. And this can be done on a variety of levels across the various outcomes. So back to your other question about whether we're going further than what is currently required in most degrees. I prefer to think that the DQP areas of learning and related outcomes are bringing to the forefront what excellent faculty and departments are thinking about for their degree programs these days. Those who've been in student learning outcomes work, especially related to degree programs, know that if we go beyond the form of that SLO work, there is an integrity in it that impels a department or discipline group to get rid of certain ideas from the degree curriculum. I've listed a few here, and I know that Carol also mentioned, knowledge for knowledge's sake, but we can't just say, well, at least they've learned something, and after all learning is useful. No, that isn't sufficient these days, or I don't know if it ever was, for a coherent and cohesive program of study. We also have to question a course curriculum that's basically a vehicle for delivering truckloads of information, primarily because that's how the instruction has been done in that discipline or in that course for eons. Information is available at students' fingertips these days. Our degrees are really about students learning to locate, interpret, evaluate, use, even create information. And then, may I just tread on a sensitive area for a minute? Student learning-based degree programs should not include courses just because they're important to the perceived well-being or professional stimulation of those teaching the courses, or because there's an available slot within the usual number of credits for the degree. We are really transforming the curriculum based upon student needs. But my question is, isn't that really where the SLO rubber meets the road? We don't simply do SLOs to figure out what students are learning from the course content we already decided to present. Instead, we do SLOs to figure out what students need to learn, and then we redesign our courses and programs to focus on that needed learning. In fact, that's how SLO work transforms a student's college experience.
So what do you think is holding colleges back from taking a wholesale look at the idea of a separate GE component?
Well, I think the question is really that GE is designed for a different purpose. And so what we want to remember is the general education component was at one time an innovation. It was designed to curb a trend, an unsightly trend, toward discipline-only studies that did not address a student's breadth of knowledge or exposure to multiple ways of viewing the world. In order to reinforce the importance of a liberal education for all degree recipients, even engineering students, even science students, the concept of the general education component arose. But, you know, as all good ideas in higher education seem to go, it now has become an entire bureaucracy around general education courses and how you get yours on the list and how we make sure that we have as many as the other discipline. Or I'm exaggerating, but to some degree there is this system now that really has expanded beyond the initial need to ensure the important aspects of a liberal education. So, as I expect we'll discuss later, integrative studies and exposure to breadth of knowledge are still as important as they have ever been for a college degree recipient. They're just as important as the need for specialized knowledge and the building mastery within a discipline or a specific area of study. I would say, Laurel, for us the real issue is how is the current organizational structure in which the general education component is handled more or less completely separately from the discipline-specific course requirements, how is that hindering our planning and discussions around a coherent and connected package of learning? I agree with Carol Goldsmith. We have to understand that organizational structure can't be allowed to hinder our necessary discussions and planning to ensure the full 2-year program is coordinated to achieve these learning and levels of competency. You know, it's not just about having a student exposed to a certain competency so we can say, yes, that we've achieved that SLO. Over the course of a cohesive 2-year program, we should be able to show how these competencies are introduced, how they're reinforced, how the students really achieve the level that we expect. So I would say that the issue really is kind of this bureaucracy and how it gets in the way of the work that we want to have done.
Okay, well, let me bring Natasha Jankowski into the conversation. Natasha is a researcher who follows student learning outcomes work and assessment in higher education across the country. Welcome, Natasha.
Hello.
Natasha, are there models out there where the general education program is not a separate part of the curriculum, but is a part of the integrated program of study for the degree? Tell us what you've seen in that regard.
Sure. Well, there's sort of a variety of ways I think institutions that are working with this idea or thinking about an integrated approach have approached it. I think some of it are ways we've seen for a long time, which is sort of focusing on one outcome across an institution, and you'll see this in things like writing across the curriculum or creation of learning communities around a single focus. But I think it might actually be better to focus on some institutions that have just fully integrated general education into a program of study. But before I sort of go into that, I think I can't help it. I am a resource pusher. So I will mention a couple places to look for resources on general education. And I think there's a really nice survey from 2009 on broadly looking at general education practices that was conducted by AAC&U. That's very helpful. There's some great literature and thinking about this, several instances in New Directions for Community Colleges. Even there's a really great, actually, like 1982, that's still hugely relevant edition, really thinking about general education in a variety of ways. So I think these are issues that, while reframed in a different kind of way and in the context of the DQP come back up, these are the sort of integration of general education is something that's been around for a while. There's also actually a couple of really nice pieces recently in Assessment Update, if anyone is interested in those. One from the most recent Assessment Update focusing on developing and implementing a multidisciplinary approach to assessing critical thinking in general education, but doing it from the program. And so there are resources out there. So please feel free, if you're interested in this, to sort those out. But specifically for institutions, some places that are interesting in their approach to this, one that I think I would point people to take a look at is Northern Virginia Community College. Their approach to general education, they actually have a statement that says that they recognize that student attainment of the general education goals of the college is achieved within the context of academic degree programs. So they actually do all of their assessment of general education embedded within the program courses, and it's actually through the program that the students get their general education requirements met. There's actually, if you want to hear about their work from their Associate Vice President for Academic Services, a really great article in this spring 2013 peer review, and I feel as though I should probably post after this underneath this webinar a list of resources for people as I'm just like mentioning all of these things. But they have a really great, the article by Sharon Robertson talks about their work in developing a community college roadmap that students can use to meet their general education requirements, and really the process that they engaged with, that the faculty went through to think about how they're structuring this. So when you organize, learning around general education, what are you really organizing, and what does that look like, and why is it that we're doing it the way that we've done? So Northern Virginia Community College is a good place to take a look. Another sort of model or approach to integrating general education is really embedding the assessment of where students meet general education requirements within a program of study. So instead of having sort of a list of courses and it's assumed that a student has fulfilled a gen ed requirement by taking that course, actually embedding the assessment into existing course structures. Miami-Dade is a great example of this, and they have a very informative website on that. If you want sort of a more, a slightly different context, actually, Canada is a really interesting example of this because they don't really have a general education program. So if you want something more of a slightly international flavor, I would recommend taking a look at Canada for this, because their institutional learning outcomes basically are what they're looking at. So some institutions will have only institutional learning outcomes, and that's sort of the same as gen ed outcomes for them. But it's really embedded. It's embedded entirely into the program of study. So if you're interested, also take a look at Canada, specifically University of Guelph. But I think I will sort of stop there and not overwhelm.
No, thank you. That's really valuable information, and hopefully we can get that up on our website so people will have access to that. Getting back to the colleges, like most of our member institutions, which do have that separate GE component in their instructional structure, what are some ways the institutions have tried to make the broad integrative knowledge a part of their cohesive program with the specialized knowledge?
Sure, and I think there's a lot of mechanisms by which colleges have really tried to sort of connect learning for students and avoid curricular fragmentation because of the separate component structures. And some of those are capstones or culminating experiences. So really providing a space for students to bring together in a variety of ways the different elements and aspects of their learning experience over their time at the institution. Portfolios is actually a great way that institutions have engaged with this work because it allows students to become more reflective about the different courses and paths that they're taking through an institution or many institutions to get to a degree, so it helps them see coherence in the sort of different elements in which they're engaging. Internship experiences also, when done well, have been a really helpful mechanism or a lever by which institutions can really sort of bring these cohesive elements together. So I think there's a lot of activity happening to do it, but it's definitely an element that is added sort of to this existing structure. So really adding that experience that allows students to bring their different pieces of their education together.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to pose the question that I posed to Krista Johns earlier. What do you think is holding colleges back from taking a wholesale look at the idea of a separate GE component?
Sure, and I think some of these have been touched upon, and so I will just say job well done to Krista and Carol in having this conversation thus far. But part of it, I think, when you talk about general education, is there's just a real difficulty in who owns gen ed, and who is responsible for it, and how is it organized, and why. And it becomes a very somewhat contentious conversation, I think, as Krista was touching on, especially when there's budget lines associated with this. So at some institutions, you'll have specifically in a time of performance or pushing on looking at graduates, departments where there might not be a lot of majors, but there is a high supply of general education courses that they sort of supply to kind of that course list. It becomes a very a fine conversation to have, and so part of this is institutional and organizational structure. Part of this is disciplinary based structures. Part of it is just a difference in language and how faculty, when they come together, talk about this, which I think is one of the great benefits of the DQP, is to really provide that language that allows us in conversations to really see what we're talking about in terms of our curriculum and our degree and how these pieces fit together in a way that can help us move and shift and think outside of potentially disciplinary boundaries. But there's also just structural elements about alignment with general education with other institutions and issues of transfer. And so institutions that have worked really hard to create, that have a lot of transfer students going through a general education that's linked to an institution where the majority of their students go, that then wants to have this sort of conversation and shift things in a different way. There's all these external pieces that you need to align and sort of fall into place in partnerships with other institutions and agreements that make it, while I think the benefit of the conversations and the ideas are very, very clear once they begin, actualizing them becomes a bit more difficult because of those variety of structural issues.
Right, right. All right, well, listen, I'm going to turn back to Krista for a moment. Krista, I've got a few questions for how our colleges can begin to align their programs with the DQP degree-level student learning outcomes and competencies. Walk us through the area of broad integrative knowledge and how a disciplined faculty can begin to talk about this in the context of their degree program.
Okay. I think let's start by looking at what this area of learning is about. Breadth of study, and the purpose is to provide students with learning about relationships between fields of study and foundations of knowledge, or how people consider things to be of knowledge and how they develop that and change it. As departments talk about this kind of learning in the context of their own degree program, the definition starts to be used as a way to understand the purpose of broad integrative knowledge in the students' generalized learning and competency develop across the degree. There are really kind of two layers to this. And it's two layers across, as we talked about with the meta learning idea. We're looking at two things. We have a student who should be learning the value of studying relationships between fields of study and how knowledge in these fields is developed and revised. Why is that important? How does this pertain to them as a person moving forward in their lives, and the competency that this generates for them in viewing new things they are exposed to as they move through their lives. And then at the same time, the degree discipline faculty are looking at which relationships between which fields of study are most beneficial for the students in this program of study to learn about. And so then they can look at how do they ensure those specific comparisons are included in the curriculum and in assessments. So now, after considering the kinds of learning and how that kind of learning is addressed in the degree program, the department faculty can look at the degree level outcomes. And there what they're doing is to say, what was meant in the DQP framework by these particular outcomes? And what do our outcomes currently stated for the discipline degree program really accomplish all that was intended here? And I've got to say something, Laurel, because I can already feel that certain SLO junkies out there are reading these outcomes and harumphing, because they're saying, you know, what are they doing with these action words related to the SLOs, and are they really the right action verbs? And so I'll just give you the advice I've given myself, which is don't go there. You know, it kind of diminishes the value of the discussion. The point is, what is intended here with these outcomes for the kind of learning that is broad integrative learning? And do our competencies, our SLOs, really capture that at this time? Here's the rest of the list of the outcomes that are part of the DQP's framework related to broad integrative knowledge. So then, here are a few suggestions for discussion topics to get the conversation going on broad integrative knowledge. How does your department explain the value of liberal education to the degree students? And what communication is undertaken to explain the value of attaining an associate degree, even for students whose goals are to transfer? And I'm not going to get into it again, but in one of our earlier webinars, we talked about the very serious message the data provide about the importance of that associate degree, even for transfer students. Just as a nutshell, there's roughly a 12% difference in students' ultimate achievement of a bachelor's degree if they first do complete the AA degree. So this really is important. But what is the communication at the departmental level in the degree program courses on this importance? And then, how does the listing of broad integrative knowledge competencies alter the thinking in the department about the content offered in the program of study? I mean, we tend to work traditionally off of our course outlines, but is there anything different that happens when we begin by focusing on the program outcomes? And do your students understand how the breadth component impacts their learning competencies? How is it that a student becomes a better student, a better functioning person out there in the real world and on the job by having this competency in breadth and integrative knowledge? So, and then there's one other question that might be an interesting one for the department. If one were to focus on programmatic degree level outcomes across the curriculum, how might that alter the student pathways at your college? Might there be fewer courses? Might it be different courses? What might happen if that were to be the primary focus?
So if the discipline faculty can ensure the broad integrative knowledge outcomes are met within their discipline or area courses, what's wrong with just leaving the general education courses untouched rather than trying to shake up the whole organizational structure?
That's a very pragmatic question. And I can see how this could be considered as a pretty expeditious way to get that alignment of the program done with the DQP learning outcomes. But the problem is this. The degree requirements have to have an integrity. Each course must make sense as a part of the package of learning, and each should be essential to the learning and the competencies expected of a student earning the degree. So we can't just say, so that extra year is really worthless, but we can't do anything about it, so help yourself. No, of course not. These are critical elements of the degree. And so the discipline can't go there. There's another piece of it to consider. And I will say I do consider it quite likely that most disciplines can include in their degree level SLOs in the discipline side those particular areas of broad integrative knowledge. But over a 2-year program, students and employers and transfer institutions should be able to expect a level of competency in accordance with what you would get in 2 years of study, not just in those limited courses that are the discipline courses.
All right. So the complement to broad integrative knowledge is specialized knowledge. What does a discipline faculty have to think about here that they're not already thinking about?
To be honest, Laurel, I will say that in my work, now I'm at the accrediting agency, but in my previous work in higher education, a lot of that thinking had already been previously done. I wouldn't say, even in the SLO work, that we necessarily begin at that point of the question. But let's look here at this definition of this kind of learning. It's the depth of study in a particular area of discipline, but the purpose is to permit students to learn the skills for mastery and to also achieve mastery in the chosen discipline or area. So again, the definition can be used to understand its purpose within the student's generalized learning and competency development. And so the student should be learning the importance and value of learning the skills for mastery. There should be an understanding that there is a different kind of learning and accomplishment involved in mastering a particular area than one gets in gaining that broad perspective. Both are important and both are different, and they're different learning skills. At the same time, the degree discipline faculty should be looking at, okay, in our AA program, which areas are best suited as essential or just best suited for this exercise, however the department wants to look at it, for students to work on mastery. And then again, looking from there to the outcomes, what was intended by the DQP framework with these particular outcomes as to developing the mastery, the specialized knowledge competencies? And do the outcomes that are currently associated with your degree program really go there as well? And this is a conversation that can really be enriching, because you are not saying we should get rid of our work and start anew with this new faddish idea. Instead, given the work we've done over the years, how can we enhance that by looking at these competencies and having this conversation? So some questions that could be asked. One task within the degree is for students to know the difference between learning for general understanding and learning for mastery. How does the degree curriculum make that distinction? Again, SLOs these days are about having students also informed of what their experience is about. How is that communicated? Another area of discussion starter might be, how can your degree program teach students to delve in and learn something completely? How can they demonstrate mastering or conquering something of depth within that field of study? And what knowledge in your associate degree program is suitable for mastery? How can you even understand associate degree level mastery from the bachelor's level? Or if you want to use CTE terminology, from the entry level to the mid-career level of their work experience. So, and another question for colleges which offer liberal arts degrees is, within the liberal arts degree program, how can students attain the specialized knowledge to learn mastery? This is not going to happen by accident. So how is that going to happen? And this may call upon the disciplines who have those areas of emphasis within a liberal arts degree to really consider how this will be a key component of the learning experience.
Well, I'm really intrigued by this whole idea of mastery. Is mastery really a word used with a 2-year associate degree? And if so, why do students need to even move forward with a bachelor's degree?
Well, mastery is critical. We have to understand that at the first 2 years of college, whether it's the final first 2 years or the first 2 years packaged with many other years of college, that students need to have capacities to learn, and they have to have those skills in their pocket, so to speak, when they move forward in whatever direction they move forward. Mastery is one of those pieces. No student should earn a college degree without learning the value and also attaining the skills needed for going deep in a subject and really getting to handle it thoroughly. I think your question is going more to the degree of mastery. In a 2-year program of study, it may not be possible for students to master things to the same degree as they would in a 4-year program of study. Or the bachelor's program may involve mastery of additional competencies or knowledge. But however one looks at that, mastery is a kind of learning that must be begun and must be attained as an outcome at the AA level and then built upon if a student goes forward with a bachelor's degree.
Okay, well, I'd like to follow up to that just a little bit. First with you, Krista, and then Natasha, I'd like to find out your thoughts on this. I keep thinking that of all the 5 areas of learning in the DQP, these 2 seem to fall right within the wheelhouse of what folks have understood for ages to be part of a degree. Why is it that this additional work is needed to ensure students have that integrated, cohesive package of learning when they graduate with a degree?
Well, I'll start, and I know Natasha, I'm sure, has plenty to add here. But the institutions are about continuous quality improvement, and that includes in the area of the curriculum and in achieving better outcomes for students in their learning. It's also about going deep in the SLO work, making that a meaningful activity, and not really just dwelling on what has been written down years ago and kind of going through those exercises, but to keep it fresh and alive today for the faculty who are working with the degree program now. I also have to say, the organizational challenges that we've kind of touched on between the separation of GE from the discipline is part of an issue that has to be dealt with now. I think it has hampered this idea of integrated study as a degree program, and we have to go there if we want to have a voice in the national discussion about the value of a degree. And, it's important for the integrity and credibility of what we're saying that a student gains from a degree to really go through this conversation and to really ensure that we are giving this level of attention to the general education package, but to this cohesive point between broad integrative knowledge and specialized knowledge. Natasha, what do you say?
Yeah, I would echo that and say I think that not only is it needed now at this point in terms of just that this is something that we should be engaging with, but that I think it's something I hear from faculty, that this is also something that faculty want. And I hear this, maybe this is just me reframing what I hear in a way that makes sense for this, but where there's sort of this disconnect that faculty see where a student comes and they're going, you know, the student isn't writing as well as I would like them to, but they took, you know, their general education writing course. And there's that disconnect and sort of assumption of this is handled somewhere else. And that we don't want students to just check off these requirements and just move through them as a list. That when there are institutions that really have a conversation about what is it that brings these pieces together and what is it that all of our students should be able to do when they leave, that you really want to be sure that, I mean, these are areas that institutions and faculty have identified as important to our students. And so making that integrated approach, making that cohesive package of why we're structuring this in the way we are, or why we're thinking that these are areas that you as a student should care and engage with, and really understanding that, you know, this is all of us as we're thinking about our students moving through an institution, and part of this together because these are all areas that we find important, but it might look a little different in mine, and it might look a little different in yours, but that collectively these are areas that we all really care about. And making that explicit in ways that we really haven't in the past, so it doesn't become something that's not as meaningful for students as we really see the value of these elements and what they can be.
So Natasha, in thinking about all that we're asking of our colleges in their alignment of the degree level outcomes with the DQP, can you talk a little bit about why is it important or timely for them to embark on this work now?
Sure, and I think Carol did an excellent job of framing this in her remarks, and I would echo her sort of why this is important for her institution to engage with. But I think just thinking broadly, there's an increasing unbundling or fragmentation of learning experiences for students. There's a growing variety of venues where learning can occur. Students have more options available to them, move through our educational systems in ways that they haven't in the past, and piece together, you can piece together a variety of different venues and outlets to get your degree requirements. And so there really needs to be a way to pull all of these different elements together into a coherent educational experience. It's also hugely helpful and timely, I think, for students. As just the variety of educational providers grows, students need to understand what are the various elements that we're asking them to engage in when getting a degree, and what does that mean, and how are these connected? How does your learning build over time, and what is it that you're building towards? And really thinking about that degree that you're building towards and what that looks like and what that means. To make it sort of actionable for a student and something that they can grasp and hold on to, so they can understand sort of why, what these courses are supposed to get them. What is the outcome that we're really hoping for here? What do you think it's all going to add up to? And how they connect in a variety of ways. So I think it's incredibly timely for our institutions, but also hugely timely for our students, and especially helpful as they move between and among our institutions, which they just increasingly have the opportunity to do.
Okay, and Krista, can you build on that a little bit? Why is it important or timely, in your opinion, for this work to be done now?
Well, I'll take a little different tack on it. Most of us know about the tremendous national pressure for higher education to come up with what is the value of a degree. This is being driven from many fronts, but it includes the federal government, where $17+ billion is spent on student loans, and people are saying, what are we getting for that value? And students are being saddled with debt, and they're questioning whether they're getting something of value. I also have to say that the president's announcement of a rating system for colleges should raise the alarm, or at least make the clock start ticking on why it is that faculty everywhere should embark on deep discussions of how students learn, what they learn, and what competencies they gain from their degree program experience at that college, at each college. And I mean, people are associating value with things like what is the cost of going to college, or maybe, you know, adding that in some kind of a ratio with what is the entry-level salary someone gets when they graduate. I think those are all great items to raise as discussion points, but certainly there has to be in the mix, what is the student gaining in terms of learning and competency that across a lifetime translates into tremendous benefit both for the student and for our society and for the economy. Basically, I think this is the time, if there ever was one, when higher education needs to jump in or kind of flex its voice to remain at the front of defining what is the value of a degree. And it involves these kinds of conversations we've been talking about in our webinars over the last couple weeks.
Right. Well, Natasha, I see you've put a couple links up there for the NILOA website and the DQP Corner. Do you want to talk a little bit about those resources for those people who have not yet visited? I'm pretty sure most of our colleges have probably familiarized themselves with this. I hope they have, but if not, tell us a little bit about these resources.
Sure. And actually, Krista said, you said something that just triggered in my head something that I think is so important to push on in this conversation. And Carol said it, and I said it, and you said it, and Laurel, I think you even mentioned it in a conversation, but I don't think we ever made it explicit. But this is really a faculty discussion, and it's owned by the faculty, and that's what can make this so powerful, I think, is that that's where this conversation needs to be happening, and that's who should be leading this. And so it's so, I think, so important to just sort of refocus and reinforce that point that it is owned and led by faculty talking. So sorry to throw that in, but resources, yes. So please go to the NILOA website. If you've been there before, come back again. We are constantly updating our resources that are available. And if you're looking for something and you didn't see it there and you think it'd be a helpful resource, please feel free to contact me, and I will add it to the website. We do have a DQP Corner, which is a page with everything you'd like to know about the degree qualifications profile. No, not really, but there's a lot of information there. I would specifically point towards there's a DQP resource kit, which has a variety of topics and information for institutions that have been working with the DQP. Our resources are from institutions that we're asking, as they're engaging with this, we'd like information on curriculum mapping, a data audit, information on transfer and what that looks like in relation to this. And so all of the resources that you'll find in the DQP resource kit come from institutions doing this work, asking for these. We also have DQP in practice examples, which are institutions sharing their experience working with the DQP. There are a variety of institutional types and a variety of different uses of the DQP there. So that's a great way to get a look at what institutions are doing with it. There's also links to resources. A lot of the institutions are also sharing the work that they've designed. So if they did a survey or revised a rubric or created a co-curricular inventory, that information is also shared on their in-practice story. And then I think the last one to sort of point to in our DQP Corner is that we do have a variety of not just the ACCJC webinars, which have been, I think, hugely beneficial for a variety of people engaging with this work and thinking about it, but some previous webinars that are all recorded and available in our webinar series. And some are shorter than others. And so if you need a tool to just sort of have people at your institution learn a little bit more about what the DQP is and what it means, we have some shorter opportunities for that, and some more specific and some with authors. So there's just a variety of information available on that website. So please take a look.
All right, great. Thank you, Natasha. And I really do encourage everyone to visit the website and explore as much information as you can, because it's a really valuable resource. So we're running out of time here. So once again, you've just heard from Krista Johns of the Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges, and Natasha Jankowski of the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment, and our special guest, Carol Goldsmith, President of West Hills College in Coalinga. And I just want to thank you all so much for sharing your expertise and insight about broad integrative knowledge and specialized knowledge. And once again, I want to give a big thanks to Robert Dumas of NILOA for all of his assistance in hosting our webinar series. And this concludes our Degree Qualifications Profile Project webinar series. If you haven't already done so, please check out the other webinars at dqpp.org/webinars and our resources page at the same address. And please do, once again, as I said before, visit the NILOA DQP webpage for a multitude of information about aligning outcomes to the DQP. And don't hesitate to contact us with comments or questions. And I just want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for joining us. We so appreciate your being here and hearing what we have to say. So thanks, everyone, and have a great day.